to Jemma, and Jemma, once again, thank you so much for your incredibly frank contributions, and really all lived experience based contributions. You said put yourself first, and that was actually approached through the lens of being a female working professional, a professional who's been entrusted with managerial and people leadership duties, and a caring individual, an individual who meanwhile has been diagnosed with ADHD, and a mother of an individual with ADHD. And once again, really, we shouldn't forget, or we shouldn't sort of take things for granted and forget to sort of say thank you, because literally, I thank you for agreeing to continue to have another discussion about your experience as a mother, and a mother to a fellow neurodivergent human, and a boy. And again, let's not forget, the society has got expectations. We shouldn't adopt those expectations by no means, or feel victimized by those expectations, but those expectations are there, and they're creating bias that sometimes is hidden, and sometimes we allow to affect us without even wishing to do that. And then the expectation of the society from boys nowadays is to be of a certain image, to be strong, to not cry, to be masculine, to hold a really tight upper lip, and not to show emotions, not to be vulnerable, and so many other things. I suppose there's a cultural element of where you grow up, and whether you're an urban center or a rural sort of little town. I'd like to open the floor, and I know, and I'm very conscious, I always talk a lot. This brain is very busy, and I want so much to connect with my guests. But the floor is yours. Can you get us started with your experience? And I'm sure more will be unpacked from there.
Yeah, I think any parent can probably resonate with what I'm about to discuss in this podcast, is how much of a difficult, unexpected and emotional journey it is being an advocate for your child when you're not really quite sure what you're doing. As we discussed previously, I now know I'm ADHD, and potentially they wanted me to screen for autism as well. But I haven't gone down that route. We did for my son, and he was diagnosed with ADHD and autism. He's also diagnosed with epilepsy, as well as having a language disfluency and very poor vision. So he has a lot thrown at him in his life. I think him growing up, it's probably easier to go back to the beginning, really, isn't it? Growing up, his nursery teacher raised concerns about his hearing. They thought he might be deaf. And I was a bit like, well, why do you think that? Because I don't think he is. And she said, well, we call his name and he doesn't respond. And I was like, okay, well, I get that too, And she's like, well, what do you mean? I said, well, I get that he doesn't answer to his name, but he answers to other things. And she said, well, look, watch, Oscar, Oscar. She was going, he wasn't turning around. And I went, chocolate. And he went, whew. And I was like, well, there you go. He's not deaf. He's just deciding not to listen. Because he's so engrossed in whatever he's doing that it's not that important until he hears something that's a bit more exciting than his name. And I genuinely think now that he doesn't actually hear his name. We have this little thing that when he isn't answering me, I shout Dave, and he turns around and goes, I'm not Dave. And it gets his attention. And I think him growing up, it was kind of a lot of things were weighted in the wrong direction. So I think when he first started primary school, everybody put a lot of focus on his eyesight, because he was going through kind of hospital treatment for his eyesight. We were doing lots of sort of testing on his brain to see how connected the eyes were with the brain, because he was so sort of poor vision. At one point they did discuss registering him partially sighted, and now his eyesight is better, but effectively if we take his glasses away he can't see anything, which helps at bedtime sometimes, not gonna lie, and that's kind of a journey he's been on with that. And I think all of the school, as great as they were, the Senko at the time just kept saying, oh, it's down to his eyesight, and it's, no, you don't need to worry about that, we've got that handled with a specialist at the hospital. And I think it took for a change in Senko, I think around year 3, he went into a blended class of year 3-4s, because he's a tiny little school, and she was the Senko there. And I think having him in the class with that Senko and being the class teacher really then identified what she was seeing and what she felt she was experiencing with him, and she wanted to go down the route of a screening for ADHD first. And we obviously followed the pathway, which everybody who's listening to this will know is ridiculously long, and we are still not at the end of that pathway yet. However, he is now diagnosed. He was diagnosed privately about 3 years ago now, maybe 2.5 years ago. We finally have his medication appointment on Tuesday. So the non-private diagnosis was finally confirmed in January last year. They agreed that he did actually have ADHD, which I felt was wild, that they wanted me to carry on waiting for his place on the NHS waiting list to actually for them to do the same test as a GMC registered doctor in a well-known private hospital in London to confirm that what she was saying was true. And my argument was like, I've literally just taken a pressure off of you, yet it's not acceptable. You have to run your own test to agree with it, which I found wild. And I think the hoops that we even had to jump through to get him on the list to even be looked at for a screening was incredible. I think I had to sign up to and pay for a parenting course first before they'd even give me an application form to apply for him to be looked at for screening to prove that I wasn't a bad parent. And then we had to fill out a form, and school had to fill out a form, and we had various people come in and assess him, not actually I can't remember what they're actually called now, educational psychologists. I can never remember the correct word, the one that you go through for the screening process. We kind of had all these different people and all this different evidence that was building up, and his file was getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and it culminated in a lot of form filling. And the teacher and the Senko who he had was brilliant. She was absolutely incredible, and she was so brutally honest. And she said, Jemma, I want you to realize that what you're about to read isn't necessarily how I feel about Oscar every day, but we have to show them when he is at his worst and how difficult it can be for him. And she said, this is going to be a tough read. So get yourself a glass of wine and a box of tissues and saddle up. And I'm so glad she did, because it was set there reading effectively a book about my son, calling out every kind of bad trait about him in one go and having no positive spin on it whatsoever. And that's hard as a parent to read. But then to have to do that exercise myself as well was even harder. And I don't think I was prepared for how hard that was going to be. I literally had to sit there for the best part of a week because I had to keep going back to it and sit there and bash my own child. And that was horrific. I hated every second of it because I was like, I don't want to talk about it like this. This isn't my child every day. And he has so much positivity about him and so many great things I could say about him. I hate just focusing on the negatives. It's a really, really dark place to be. And kind of going through that multiple times and then having to do it again, obviously, when we went private, and again when we went down the autism route as well. I felt like I spent a lot of time being an advocate for him, but in a negative way. And no one really tells you as a parent how hard that's going to be. And I think that was the biggest takeaway for me from that, was how hard that emotionally would be, let alone not knowing what the hell you're doing, because no one gives you a booklet or tells you what this journey is going to look like. And, you know, we only went private for him in the end because he was being seen through my work private medical for his epilepsy. And the neurologist who we were seeing then said, he can't wait any longer for a diagnosis. Like, this is impacting him at school massively. I think prior to medication, Oscar was doing sort of SATs papers, and he wasn't getting past question 2 or 3 before something distracted him and he'd lost it and couldn't carry on. By the time he was medicated, he passed all but one of his SATs at the end of year 6. And he had missed one. Well, I don't think he missed it. I think he'd only got to question 2, and he just got burnt out of all the exams that he was having to do of the maths paper. And maths has always been his weakest point because it's too prescriptive. It's too linear and he can't be creative. And he's like, I've given you the answer. Why do you want me to write how I got there? I get that. It's annoying. So he effectively failed one paper, but then still managed to come out with an above average grade, which for maths to him prior to medication was just I'm not doing it. He didn't want to be interested in it at all. So I think it was a massive turning point for him. But however, going into that private route was with challenge as well, not just from the money side of things, but I didn't realize at the time how it all works. So his consultant said, "Oh, this is my colleague. She works in the same hospital. We could go treat him." And I was like, "That sounds great. Like, you've both got his best interest at heart then. Let's go with that." I didn't know what a shared care agreement was at that point in time. I'd never heard of it, and I didn't know what it was for. And we went through lots of appointments with her. She diagnosed him. We started on medication. It kind of was a bit up and down. And then he was stabilized on a medication and doing quite well at school. And then she said, "Well, you can go off to your doctor now and they can take over and they can take it on, and you don't have to pay to see me anymore," because this wasn't covered by my work screening. So we're having to pay to see her privately and then pay for the medication charges as well. Going to the doctor said, "Oh, that's fine, we'll do it, but you need a shared care agreement." What's that? I went back to the consultant. She said, "Oh, I don't do those." Oh, so what are my choices then? And she said, "Well, you can go back to CAMS and say you've got a private diagnosis, and then there's another list that they put you on, which is just for a medication review." Okay, off we go, we do that. And then CAMS, "No, we don't do it like that anymore." Okay, so what do? We wait for you to get to your place in the list, or Oscar's place in the list, and then we will review whether we think he's got ADHD. And then after that, we'll review whether we think he's on the right medication, and we will carry it on. I was like, "Okay, good. How long does that take?" Don't know. 6 years we've been on that list, 6 years, and we finally got the appointment this Tuesday coming, and I'm so excited because it's going to save me about £650 every other month, which is huge. I could be spending that money on therapies for him that he desperately needs, that at the moment his money is being diverted towards that. Yeah, that was a lot. I've not stopped for a breath or a question or for you to intervene. There's a lot more I could say on it, but I don't want to literally just sit here and garble on about it.
Oh my God, no. Incredibly powerful, extremely useful, extremely useful. You see, I've been with Gay now as the individual members lead for over 4 years. And much as I thought I kind of had a good idea, and also as a fellow mother to 2 boys, who I also very strongly believe and I observe to be cognitively different, I didn't know. I didn't know that much. And really, to have you here explaining this to other parents to be, other humans who haven't even studied or also are halfway into this infamous list, and not for 6 years, but for the first 2, and they're waiting for the next 4. Obviously, every case is different, and perhaps the whole system might sort of appreciate and wake up to the fact that there's a greater need, and there's empirical data. And this is what I also particularly love. You're mentioning how Oscar's doing at the SAT tests is basically improved massively through the medication. To have a kiddo who already, I mean, at the age of 10, 11, 12, they know themselves, they observe themselves, they know who they are, to feel pushed down every single time as a failure, because of course you failed the test. That's the language. So I'm a failure would be the and nobody needs to be great at mathematics whiz, but really fail any test, even where you'd think, but I'm creative. I can write, I can do writing, I can show, these elements, to not be able to go past question 2 or 3, and then with medication, to be able to pass. I mean, it's massive. It's massive. And also, wow, what can I say? It's not even congratulations, but obviously, I mean, no, I'm personally as a fellow parent, I mean, of people who go through all of this, and I'm prepared to go through twice and 3 and more times, to really make sure that the children get to fulfill their true potential, get to be seen, get to enable themselves, equip themselves for a life that they deserve to have, and a life that makes them think that, hello, world, this is who I am. That's my place. And I'm prescribed this and that. I'm described as that, but I'm not just that. I have this hobby. It's just remarkable. Jemma, thank you very much. If you don't mind, because of course we've spoken about us, and as mothers, we can talk quite a lot about the sense of motherhood and the fact that it doesn't come with a manual, and obviously so many more manuals would be required. And because we're neurodivergent, we wouldn't be able to read the manual. I wouldn't. I cannot read manuals. I take something from IKEA. I cannot sort of, I mean, I will put it together. Perhaps I might actually create a chair out of the bed,
Yeah.
because I haven't actually read the manual for the bed. It doesn't matter. What I want to hear in this experience, in these 6+ years of Oscar being through this, how do you see him appreciating who he is? How does he
Well,
self-define himself? What has been the emotions you've observed?
he's amazing. He's like literally my inspiration to be. He's such an advocate for his neurodiversity, and I love that for him. I think when he was diagnosed, we were so lucky, to give it a bit of context. We were so lucky that he was in a tiny little village school where they have 15 kids a year. So, and they're split year classes. There's only 30 kids in a class. So before he was even diagnosed or gone on kind of like the SEM register, he was effectively having a TA sit with him all the time to try and help him. And it was actually her that picked up on his epilepsy, because she said, I think this is just more than Oscar being away with the fairies. It was, she said, I think he's having absent seizures. I was like, what the hell is that? I had childhood epilepsy, and I didn't know that mine started as absent seizures, and actually mine progressed into full clonic seizures. He's never have, thankfully, and the consultants are hopeful that because we've caught it early that he never will. Obviously there's always a risk and we have to have lots of monitoring, but I think because of that, and this teacher, he was very aware very quickly of what he had to deal with. And I think it was then explained to him, this is what could be potentially holding you back, because you are missing chunks of class. He effectively switches off and goes vacant and then comes back and he's got no recollection of what's going on. And as soon as we started talking about it, he would tell everybody, I've got epilepsy. I go absent. But I'll say, oh, well, we don't know that for certain yet, Oscar. And we kind of had the test done, and the teachers were like, yeah, we see maybe one a day, one every other day, something like that. So we went in for this 24-hour monitoring, which he thought was the best thing in the world, because we were sat in a hospital room with a phone that you just rang and they bought food and drink, and he was living his absolute best life with a PlayStation and a television, and he wasn't too keen about all the wires on the top of his head and his new hat that he'd been given, but everything else, he was just like, oh, can we stay a bit longer? He's never been allowed to play computer games for pretty much 24 hours a day and eat pizza and ice cream at midnight. So, it was a great day for him. But I think very quickly, they came back and they said that he'd had 18 seizures in 24 hours, which blew my mind. And I was a bit like, I thought we'd be lucky if we would catch one. And that kind of started his journey. And I think having that diagnosis for him then allowed him to understand why he struggled at school. And that diagnosis obviously then led to the consultant then progressing the ADHD diagnosis, and then, lovely of my work, 6 months later added neurodiversity into the policy cover, which meant I could get his autism done on our private healthcare without me having to pay private for that as well. So we were very lucky from that respect, just slightly unlucky with the timing with the ADHD. And I think he kind of got diagnosed with a lot in one go. So he kind of got told he was epileptic and he went on medication for that. And the medication wasn't great at first. It made him quite agitated. And we said to the epilepsy doctor, this isn't working. He's kind of, the teachers are saying he's now more despondent than usual. He's getting quite aggressive in his answers, not physically aggressive, but, quite argumentative. So we changed and tried something else. And soon after came the ADHD diagnosis, and then there was medication to try for that. His hunger went, which then meant he got hangry, as I call it, hungry, angry. And everything was happening at such a quick pace that I was a bit like, I want to give him a break. I don't want him to go through an autism screening as well now. Like, he's literally just been told he's epileptic and ADHD. But actually, he was dead keen for it. And he was like, Mummy, if it's going to help me, I want to do it. And I said, but it's going to be another round of questioning. It's going to be another couple of hours where you've got to sit to people and answer questions, which I know you struggle with, especially because of his speech impairment. I said, it's going to be a lot of questioning. He's like, but I'm proud that I have ADHD. And I said, I really love that for you. I love that you're proud. And he said, I don't see it as a disability, Mummy. Why do people call it a disability? And you know what? I don't either. If I fill out a form, for me even, and it says, do you have a disability? I say no. Even though it's recognised as one, I don't feel like I have one. I mean, when it comes to children, you want to recognise it as a disability because it opens doors and gets you funding for things in school. So I said, well, actually, and this is how we decided about the autism for both me and him. It was like, I don't need it. It's not going to change my life. Me being told officially that I'm autistic, even though they wanted me to do that as an outcome of my ADHD diagnosis. I was like, but for him, having another diagnosis and another disability just adds weight for him getting an EHCP. And I think we were applying for that at the same time. We'd basically finally obviously been told he was epileptic, ADHD and autism. And then it was, okay, now we need an EHCP. And this was in year 6. So obviously we were headlong going into secondary school. And I think we had applied for it before, I think it was right at the start of year 6. And I know it's supposed to be 20 weeks, but everyone knows it isn't. We went into it and the Senko was like, expect it to be turned down. And I was like, what? Why? She said, well, to give you a flavour, we have a child in a wheelchair and they got turned down. So just expect it. They didn't turn us down. And I nearly fell off my chair. And I literally went running into school because the email landed like literally 2 minutes before school pickup. And I went bursting into the school and I was like, they said yes. Like I just got a job offer of a millionaire or something. And she was like, oh my God. And we all got really excited. And then came the wait to obviously have an educational psychologist come in and then actually do the screening. But in the meantime, Oscar had started, kind of going back to the question you asked me about how he feels about it, he'd started trying to educate people, which I thought was amazing. And as part of this kind of interventions we've been having for Oscar, because we've been having a lot of trouble as a family, they'd given him some booklets about how to explain how your brain works. And he had one for autism and one for ADHD. And he kept putting them in my handbag. And I said, buddy, why do these keep ending up in my handbag? And he said, because I want to show people them. And he almost would go into a room and stand up and be like, hi, guys, here's some leaflets about how my brain works. Please feel free to have a read. And he's like, let me know if you have any questions. Like he was at a conference or, a business meeting. I've been, Q&A sessions with Oscar. And he was, in that moment, I was so proud of him because I didn't tell him to take them. And that time, I didn't even know they were in my bag. He literally stood up in front of a room full of my family, and I've got a huge family, and was like, hi, I'm Oscar. I've got ADHD and autism. Have a little learn about me. And then ask me some questions. And I almost feel like, I don't want to cry because he's going to be embarrassed. But the pride as a mother I had at that moment in time, I was like, there's my baby. He's owning it and he's proud of who he is. I can't ask for any more than that in life. Like that for me, he has so much to struggle with in life, so many things to cope with and so many barriers to learning. There's so much that I have to try and get for him in support, which is so difficult. And I hate the fact it's difficult. I feel I spend so much time fighting for him or trying to break down walls or filling in forms or sending emails or challenging people on their decision. It's like a full-time job. I'm not going to lie. And I think it's so hard as a parent without support when you don't know what you're doing. And you're just kind of floundering and thinking, okay, well, I know he needs that, but everyone says no about everything. So then you literally just have to spend your life arguing for them. And it shouldn't be like that. And if there's one magic wand I'd want in this world, it would be for SEND parents to be able to get the support they need for their children. It shouldn't be this difficult.
Yeah. You spoke of so many facts, adding also so many truths to it. I will just get started with the most recent sort of item you shared, and really, I'm extremely grateful for everything you've been sharing. That will never tire me to say. You wish that every single SEND parent will have what they need. There's so much, in the wider sort of, range of intersectionality. There's so many things that really break that accessibility. There's ethnic minorities parents, the parents of different cultures, there's parents who have got also their own challenges. We do know, meanwhile, that neurodivergence has got a genetics sort of identity to it as well. And great that we're doing this episode, Jemma, because much as I always appreciate it enormously when parents approach me in the community of GAIN speaking about the children, and you can feel the sheer amount of love and devotion and loyalty, it almost makes me want to say to them, and what about you? Have you actually looked to see yourself through this lens? You don't have to be diagnosed, because it could be that you're not, that genetic hasn't, skipped a generation or something. But really, it will help you more to help them to know yourself better. And I know we live in such, of a strange, keep on scrolling times, at times of no time to reflect and no time to pause and recompose or process the information, or give yourself that sort of confidence to ask, I'm sorry, I don't understand that. Can you please explain? We almost feel like, we are slow if we dare to say, excuse me, I didn't get that. Can you please repeat? And so we don't get this. We keep on flying on. We keep on saying, but hey, come on, I did schooling, or I go to university, or I've got a job. Surely I'm all good. Being neurodivergent doesn't make you any less good, or being neurotypical likewise. But so important, and this is what I tell my own two sons, is an identity factor. You need to know who you are. And it's part of that sort of self-discovery, which, so long as we live, it never ceases, it never stops. We keep on identifying new things. Yeah, as you said, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, that thing resonated. 10 years later, 20 years later, I feel like I'm a new person as far as this is concerned. Relationships break down, new ones get formed, things that you thought I would not sort of, as we've spoken about, personal sort of life matters, things that you thought, no, I wouldn't return to, you sort of, go back into with a different sort of lens, so much more regenerated and refreshed. And that's beautiful ways to sort of identify and get to know oneself. And parents need, please, give yourself time, do things that actually connect with you, do things that help you regenerate.
It's so important, because it's so heavy, this journey, and you take everything on your shoulders. And I know so many mums are like me, and there's not always someone to help you, but even when there is someone on the other side to help you as well, in terms of a partner or a loved one, you almost don't want to, and especially as having ADHD myself, I don't want to let go of control of anything, because I feel like if I'm not in control of it, a ball might get dropped or something might get missed, and I have to understand everything, and I need to be at every meeting, and it's all on me. And I think it was so hard with him going into secondary school, because his EHCP came literally a week before year 6 broke up. We had obviously been assigned a place at a state school, which was his first choice and our first choice. He was adamant he wanted to make a choice. And then we were left with this decision. Do we leave him in mainstream, or do we put him into a specialist school? And I thought choosing a primary school was heavy. Like, this was something else. And I literally had 3 days to try and decide. And in that 3 days, the specialist school that we identified rejected him because of his epilepsy, and the state school that we've been allocated in clearing, or whatever you call it, when they just allocate your secondary school places, were like, we don't think we can take him because his need is too much. I was like, great. So with 3 days to go before the end of term, my child is currently without a school place. What the hell do I do? And I literally was just like, I remember breaking down into tears, and I was just like, why are they doing this to me? And then my partner said to me, he went, because they know that you're going to have to accept the EHCP that you've given, because you've got 3 days to decide. And because after the school holidays start, you've got 6 weeks where no one will make any decisions, and you'll probably be afraid of your son not having a school place. And I hadn't really looked at it that objectively. And the fear for me was picking the right place. On the one hand, you're like, do I put him into a mainstream school where he could absolutely be eaten alive? He's been in a school where there's 83 children from reception to year 6 for his entire life, and it's all very sanitized, and everyone loves him and everyone knows him, and he's just unapologetically Oscar. Do I throw him into the lion's den where kids can be so mean, and he might not get the level of support, and he will get lost in there and get eaten up and chewed up and spat back out? Or do I put him into a specialist school where he could have those complementary therapies, but he might not get the education that I know he can achieve? And that decision, still now, I don't know whether I've made the right one. And I still, to this day, am not certain. We've had a very difficult week. Parents' evening this week has been quite difficult. We've had GCSE choices this week as well. He's only in year 8, and it feels wild that he's choosing his GCSEs, but that's how they do it there. It's 3 years of GCSEs, and I'm a bit like, now I've got this whole stress of what subjects do I let him choose, whilst also letting him be his own human and make his own decisions, but also rein him in because of a capability in terms of focus and concentration. I mean, he wants to be a neuroscientist, bless him, and I love that for him. When I asked him, why do you want to be a neuroscientist, Oscar? That's quite niche, but yay for you. I mean, we've had careers from him. I want to be a plane driver. I want to be a boat person. I want to be a civil engineer. Civil engineer was when he was 8. And I was like, what? Why do you want to be a civil engineer? And do you even know what a civil engineer is? He's like, yeah, because everyone needs infrastructure. I was like, okay, brilliant. But now we've moved on to, a neuroscientist. And I said, why do you want to be a neuroscientist? And he said, because everybody that's helped me understand who I am and all the things they've done for me, I want to be able to do that for somebody else. And I was like, oh. Now, I know that's going to be a hard ask for him, but he's clever. It's just obviously having his focus and attention, even in school and in a mainstream school, he's not always having that one-to-one care. And I think the level of care that I was assured was happening isn't now necessarily happening how I thought it should happen. So now I feel like I've got a new battle on my hands. I mean, he's brilliant on the surface. You say to Oscar, how is everything? Yes, great. It's wonderful. It's lovely. But as a parent, I'm constantly worrying, like, is he coping socially at school? Is he making friends? Are the kids understanding him? And so it's a constant worry for me. But in his head, he on the whole, everything feels cool in his world. I think, as you know, as a Sen mum, that then comes out at home in a very different way. He burns out at school. He will tell you he hasn't, and he will tell you everything's wonderful. But what we see at home is then very different. We get the kind of grumpy, sometimes aggressive, sometimes physically aggressive as well, because he doesn't really know how to kind of not control, that's the wrong word, but manage his emotions and deal with his emotions because of burnout. That we then see that side of it at home. And that's really hard as a parent. Then when you've got 2 kids, and I've got one at the moment that is seemingly neurotypical and one that's neurodiverse, and she's 7 and she is so wonderful with him and she just wants to help all the time. And on a Monday morning when everything is chaotic and he's still running around with one sock on and a toothbrush in his hand with no toothpaste on, and he's transports outside tooting away to take him to school, she's there, she's quietly packing his bag up, putting all these things by the door, and just, I say, sweetheart, you don't have to do that. That's not your job. And she's like, yeah, I know, but I like to because it helps everybody. And they have the cutest relationship. It's unreal. Like, they can kill each other as well. Don't get me wrong, but they're brother and sister. And sometimes I think she is his emotional punch bag a little bit at times, which I hate. And obviously we're looking for help for that and intervention for that. We have been for quite some time, but she's so caring. And as much as he lashes out on her at times, he cares so deeply for her too, which, when you've got autism and ADHD, showing care and compassion isn't always something that's that visible. But out of everybody, it's always her that he's like protective of. I love that.
Oh my God, Jemma. By the way, I don't know whether I'm following ethical etiquettes here. I'm always very conscious of ethics. But if for those 2 incredible siblings who came to one of the Argain events with the mother, the sister, younger, neurotypical, the brother, older brother, neurodivergent, and I had the pleasure to meet them with the mom, are listening to this episode. Can you please get in touch with me? I would love for all of us to meet, exactly, and then meet Jemma and your mom. It was incredible. It had made me so emotional because right there you see what the family cells are all about. It's about devotion, unconditional love, and really the way, because you see, you my God, you remind me also so much of my own observations. And as a mother, and as adults, and as kind of over analytical, overthinking, very specific to the point, people, we see things through the lens of an adult, and we're like, oh my God, that happened, and God, it's too much for one of them and the other, and they don't see it this way. And what I saw, for instance, that evening was the both siblings were sometimes telling the mother, no, it's not like you think, or it's not like what you remember. And you could see right there how much an amazing bond there is. And I love these people to keep on being seen and and really keep on inspiring ourselves, because those kids we have in our families, those kids, meanwhile, find themselves in the city of London. And this is how I met the other family. And essentially, everybody finds the place in this world. And this is the campaign of gain. It's not really that I had the purpose of Vina say it and then I don't know, Spotify pays pays us royalties with a mention of it. But it really it makes you really connect with why we run campaigns like that. The space in your. I also deprived my eldest son, who's now taking the SAT tests to go to obviously secondary school next year, because I've always been going to the school and I heard that Leo is academically doing so well. And I thought, okay, you don't need tutoring. He felt like a failure by not getting himself a place in a grammar school, okay? And that's one of the things hearing you that I keep on sort of carrying myself. It's like, if only I had given him access to sort of be somewhat familiarized with the process, this and the other, might have helped him, and it would certainly have not given him the reason to feel unsuccessful. But you know what? I will close with Oscar's incredible contribution already to our discussions. Jemma, you've been incredible, but the way that you offered some insight into Oscar's sort of psyche and really already substantial contribution to his own life, forget us, to his own life and for himself and what he oozes to his environment, is something that I really want to share before closing this, and thanking you once again for really introducing us to this incredible human.
He sees the joy in places in life that I overlook and forget because life's too busy and life's too stressful. And I probably just want to, caveat everything I've said. People watching this may not be in the same position, and I've given you an insight into a small part of the struggles and a lot of the actual reward. And I want to be real in terms of, let's do the Instagram versus reality. This hasn't been a picnic. This has been a very long journey and a very difficult journey for all of us as a family. But and Oscar's always taught me this, is you look for the happy things in life. You don't try and focus on the negative. So trust me, there have been so many negatives and so many lows as a family that we have had to battle and kind of push our way through. And I know that we are very fortunate in that, my work, private medical, has paid for a lot of it. Not everybody has that luxury, and I feel very, very grateful that we can access that. But I just, if I could say one thing, is just take the joy in the moments that are happy, because for raising a neurodivergent child, for every 10 low points, you get one. Okay. And the balance is normally tipped quite a lot in the negative favor versus the positive. But when you get those positives, they mean so much more. And to any other parent, they'll be looking at you like, why are you celebrating that? Like, it's so minor. But, for us, it's a massive win. And they're things that might seem trivial to other people, but celebrate them and teach them to celebrate that. And that's what I mean. If everyone can be a little bit more Oscar in finding the joy in these small things in life, like he can find excitement in something that I'm a bit like, what? But for him, the way his mind works and how he finds joy, I think is quite inspirational at times.
Yeah. And by the way, you also highlighted something very important. Kudos and well done, and an open call to all corporates to consider the policies and how wide-reaching, and it's not wide, obviously nowadays, and thanks to all the scientific progress we're making, we know that neurodiversity is a fact of life. Nothing more, nothing less. It's a fact of life. And because it's a fact of life, we're not asking for special consensus here. So I was saying that we need to actually make sure that the policies include what they have to include, and really diagnosis to neurodiversity and support for them, send parents in their journey will only amount to more productivity and loyalty back put into the organization. I'd like to thank you so much for your time, Jemma. And I would like to actually, just using again Oscar as the paradigm here, if only we enable our children, the people we care about, despite any masking spells or continuance that we might actually observe, because one way or another, we all mask. One way or another, we have masked or we will mask, or masking is part and parcel of life. People go to the dating, to the first dates, and they kind of mask because like, oh my God, if only, and, I was to. So people feel conscious. I think we live in times where everybody's basically almost having to feel conscious. And we wouldn't be speaking about imposter syndrome if the society was just accepting. If we were all accepting as a society, we wouldn't be speaking about panic attacks, stress, PTSD, because you would have a place to be. Now, Oscar is teaching us, in addition to enjoying the small things in life, which is really where the true joy is, but also the moral compass, always having that inner cell. And his moral compass, when I hear from the neuroscientist sort of perspective, and I think he will be there and he will do so well. And I need to know his details because I will be one of his clients.
Interesting to see how his GCSE choices go and where that ends up in life. It's kind of
absolutely.
It's a path I'm excited to watch him follow.
Absolutely. And the fact that he's actually doing that from the I want to help others like others have helped me is exactly what we need in a society that everybody's looking to really to guide some sort of way of blending things in, of covering things up, of hallucinating each other. This wishing to give back to a community is really what meanwhile neuroscientists indeed and doctors say is the best treatment to loneliness and to any other long-term sickness, is to know that you're building and you're making an actually a contribution. And back to what you were saying, it can only be that the apple falls under the apple tree, right? It is what you were saying, you don't need a degree, by the way, to have the right attitude. So when you go into life with an attitude that is, I want to see those people in the way that people have seen me, for me, is just incredible. So thank you so much for being you. Thank you so much for the contribution you make as a mother, as well as a senior professional in our sort of sector. Really, thank you for being, and thank you very much for sharing.
No, thank you for having me. Thank you.